Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a few moments as folks continue to join. Probably give us like 3 or 4 while everybody starts to trickle in. And as you're hopping on, feel free to familiarize yourself with the window. I'm sure everyone is well familiar with Zoom at this point, but feel free to drop your name and where you're joining from today into the chat. And we'll officially kick off in another minute or two past the hour, 10:02, 10:03. And actually, Riz, why don't we kick us off in the chat?
Oh, yeah. If anybody else is coming in from Denver.
Oh, good. Okay, some familiar folks on the line. Um, Hi, Alan. Really happy to have you. Excellent. I always like to play this game of who's coming from the farthest away, but from where? Do
Yeah,
we?
what's our
For those of you who don't know, Green Places is uh, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. We have a really dispersed team. I'm in San Francisco. Riz here is in Denver, Colorado. So we have a slight bias towards more Western.
Yeah, it seems that way. There's a few East Coasters, New York, DC, Philadelphia.
A couple other San Franciscos. Okay, great. All right, well, I'm sure we will have others still hopping on. Definitely a little bit of a grace period here through bio and poll. So hop on if you've got a colleague who's running a little late, tell them to still jump on. And then this is being recorded, so of course we'll make sure we send this out after the fact. And we've got Kristen Rivera also on our side in the chat. So if I miss anything, she'll be sure to ping me. And if we run out of time at the end, which forgive me, for those of you who know me, I tend to, I'll make sure we follow up by email. So keep questions coming, but we'll make sure we leave plenty of time at the end for that as well. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off. Of course, introductions. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Corinne Hansen. I'm the VP of Sustainability here at Green Places. And I am joined today, thrilled, by our new Director of Sustainability Reporting, Andrew Riscala. Andrew has rich experience in the sustainability field broadly and in sustainability disclosures. And so our team is expanding here. Our work on reporting has expanded, obviously, in the last year or so. And so very excited to formally introduce him and not so formally reintroduce him to those of you who've already worked with him and I on some partnerships. So Riz, you want to give a quick hello?
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining, and I'm really excited to get into the weeds on CDP. And this is the beginning of kind of a longer mini series that we've started. So we've got a lot of reporting frameworks to cover, but excited to focus today on the CDP.
Great. Um, so yeah, so we'll start with what's new in 2025. I think that's the burning question for everyone right now. That will tie into what happened in 2024, a couple of trends, talk definitely about scoring. So if you've got burning questions about that, you want to drop them into the chat now, feel free. And of course, we'll talk about how Green Places supports your CDP submissions so you can sort of know what to expect by working with us. And if you've got other questions, feel free to reach out, and then we will dive into the Q&A. Let's kick off with a little bit of a poll. Before we dive into what's new, have you submitted to CDP before? So choose the option that best applies to you. And if you haven't, feel free to drop into the chat what's been holding you back or what feels challenging about getting started. But have you submitted? Yes, regularly. Yes, once or twice. No, but not yet, but planning to. Or no, not sure if we will. Come here to figure out what the heck this is.
Hmm. I'll be curious to see for those that haven't done this before. Okay, yeah. Yeah.
So So hopefully everyone can see these results, but it looks like we're getting folks who have largely participated in some capacity in CDP before, and then a big chunk who are really unsure still if they're going to. Um, yeah, Riz, to your point, I'm curious, what's driving the uncertainty? If you've been asked to submit to CDP and you're trying to figure out a way to avoid it, that's a common question we get from folks. I've advised clients in both directions in the past, do submit, don't submit to CDP, may or may not apply to you as a business. Resources are scarce. And I will just say candidly that I think the number one reason I get from folks saying, I don't want to submit to CDP, I'm concerned about it, is that it's a relatively overwhelming process, especially if you're new to this. So they've made attempts to streamline their questionnaire and make things easier for SMEs. So that's a great entry point we'll talk about. But let's dig in a little bit now to some trends and talk about CDP before I let Andrew jump in with the details here. So, quick refresher on CDP. It's the global standard in environmental reporting. It's used by 24,800 companies who've disclosed as of 2024. Um, and these disclosures inform major investors who are managing over $142 trillion in assets. So, CDP is a big deal. I will say that CDP has kind of been the long-standing standard in the space, and definitely sort of investor and disclosure focused. So financial information is key here. So Andrew, let's dive in a little bit and talk about what's changing this year.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. It's interesting. You mentioned CDP's the longstanding kind of champion for environmental reporting. This is their 25th year of doing this. And it's really hard to understate how much happened last year in terms of the major changes. Kind of breaking these into pieces here. So the first thing is they unveiled a brand new portal, which was meant to streamline data entry and kind of usability. It was the first time it went live, and there were plenty of bugs and issues with it. But generally speaking, the consolidation is a huge step forward because it used to be that if you've not done this before, there were separate questionnaires for forests, water, and climate, and now everything is kind of integrated into one platform. So as I mentioned, meant to be a huge improvement there. Um, there were challenges with kind of simple things like copying and pasting into the boxes and other kind of issues with like viewing responses and importing data and conditional updates. So they actually extended the disclosure window last year to allow for companies to kind of handle those challenges. They also introduced kind of the similarly to the streamlined integrated questionnaire for the themes, an SME questionnaire that's really focused on helping.
Sorry, Riz, I'm getting some feedback here. Are you guys hearing that too?
I'm all good on my end.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, keep going.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I can switch audio. Let me know. Um, they introduced an SME questionnaire, which is really good for companies that are just dipping their foot in the pool, so to speak, and we'll talk about that afterwards. There also was a lot of work in the background for kind of the CDP to adjust the questions to make sure that the alignment of the questionnaire was there with the IFRS guidance from the International Sustainability Standards Board, so S1 and S2, meant to kind of really formalize kind of the interoperability of the questionnaire with that standard, as well as additional standards like the TNFD. And then they're working toward a really high level of interoperability with the ESRS E1 standard for climate and energy. So if the questionnaire felt different last year, that's one of the reasons why. And then finally, with respect to scoring, CDP's expanded their essential criteria scoring. So if you weren't familiar with that, that used to be reserved at the leadership or the A level. But now even companies that are, looking for awareness and management at the B and C level have to demonstrate comprehensive practices, especially within governance and risk management categories. And so that expansion may have resulted in some companies kind of not achieving scores that they thought they would have achieved. So I mentioned this before, and I think building off that poll, for those of you that may this may be your first time or you're kind of evaluating what to do this year, the SME questionnaire is a great option for newcomers. So it's a streamlined version. It tops out at, I think, 57 questions if you have to answer everything, which is a dramatic reduction from the larger corporate questionnaire. So hopefully lowering the barrier to entry there and reducing the burden of reporting. And so, as you can see on the chart, you'll qualify for the SME version. And in fact, you're recommended if you have revenue up to 50 million and a headcount up to 500. You have the option to use this questionnaire if you have headcount even up to as high as 1,000 and revenue up to 250 million. You can kind of choose which one to leverage. I think the CDP has a preference, of course, for companies to use the full questionnaire because they want to gather as much data as possible. But certainly, if you are weighing kind of the resourcing and the level of effort available, it could be a really good option if you fall into that tier. So we want to get in the weeds a little bit on trends in scoring last year since the scores were released, and Corinne has some metrics to share here.
Yeah, I obviously we work with a lot of clients on CDP submissions, and we also try to work directly with CDP. We're becoming an accredited solutions partner, and are often at events together, and in close contact, and having discussions about, is it becoming better, easier, or more challenging to score higher? And I think all are sort of true. And so I wanted to try to parse some of those trends a little bit. To give you a sense of how competitive scoring has become, 95% of the world's largest companies now publish clear carbon targets, but only about 2% of reporting companies achieve an A rating. And a little bit of creative messaging coming out of CDP, the number of companies achieving an A score in at least one category has jumped about 30% in 2024, so an increase. But that's companies achieving an A score in at least one category, not overall. And obviously, when you're disclosing and to investors and to stakeholders, that total score is really what you are particularly concerned with. So yeah, we understand that that's a bit of a challenge. It underscores how seriously companies are taking sustainability, but also how challenging it can be to stand out. And so I want to make sure that you feel equipped with getting into the weeds on CDP and understanding how to score better and better. CDP is really about demonstrating improvement on your sustainability targets and programs year on year. And so improving those scores is possible. And so let's dig in a little bit to what that structure looks like. So I'll pass it back to you, Riz.
Yep, thanks, Corinne. So looking at 2025, again, under kind of the context of 2024 was a banner year with so many changes. What's been communicated is that they're really focusing on stability this year. So they're committed to making minimal changes to the questionnaire, keeping the structure and the layout the same, the actual portal, the same usability there. So here we've kind of showing a graphic of that breakdown of that structure. So if you're new to this, I'll walk through it quickly. Kind of the first module is the introduction, and that's where you put details about your company, such as revenue, specific descriptors, a description kind of the business operations. And then in module 2, this is where you outline sort of the process for identifying, assessing, managing any impacts, dependencies, risks, and opportunities. And they'll ask questions about not just your own operations, but your value chain, looking upstream at supplier tiers, as well as downstream, and how you kind of assess and analyze the risks and opportunities that may be present in that value chain. Then in module 3, this is where you actually disclose line by line the risks and opportunities that have been found to be material. And there's a lot of detail that's possible to input here if you have financial metrics, if you know the financial lever by which the risk or opportunity is material to you, whether it's your operations or a revenue risk or an increased cost, et cetera. Being able to specify that, and then kind of detailing the process by which you kind of discover that and what you're doing about it, if anything. So there's a lot of detail in this section especially. Then in module 4 in governance, this is where you'll kind of outline both the reporting that is done up to your board level as well as your management kind of committee level, and share which leadership people are responsible for oversight. And then in business strategy, this is where you'll kind of talk about your short, medium, and long-term aspects of impacts. And then within module 6, and then really leading into modules 7, 8, 9, this is where you talk about your consolidation approach and the subsidiary structure of your business and at what level you're reporting. And then really the data that comes from, for example, your carbon footprint would be input into module 7. So any energy and emissions related information, scope by scope, category by category goes in there. You've got module 8 for all of your forest considerations, module 9 for your water considerations, plastics and biodiversity in 10 and 11. These have traditionally been optional, and we expect them to be optional again this year, but we are waiting for the kind of final word on that from the scoring methodology from CDP, which is coming out here very shortly. And then there's sector-specific modules for financial services, for example, which may or may not be relevant to you depending on the sector you specify for your company in module 1. And then finally, you have sign-off. So that's kind of a breakdown of the overarching structure. And on the next slide, I do want to talk about, again, for those that are new to this and those that may have experienced some challenges last year, the scoring structure remains consistent, but your answers, generally speaking, are evaluated across the themes. So you'll have a separate like letter grade at each theme, forest, water, and climate. And then there's the overarching kind of score that was mentioned. And your scoring occurs actually at each of 4 levels. So every question, if you look at the guidance, has a disclosure numerator and denominator for the score. And then that same kind of disclosure numerator and denominator at the awareness, management, and leadership levels. So at each letter grade, you're accumulating points. In order to move up from the initial tier, which is disclosure, D minus, and the D level, you have to get at least an 80% on the total score there to move into the next level. Now, this last year, there was a change with just within the disclosure level of being able to move from D minus to D. That used to be 45%, and they moved it up to 50%. So if you experienced kind of a reduction in score within the disclosure tier, that may have been why. Also, I'll say with respect to the weighting, that percentage score, your numerator over your denominator, kind of points scored versus points available, that's calculated as a simple percent at the disclosure and awareness, or the D and C levels. But as you get up into the higher levels, the categories are weighted. So some categories matter more than others. And so again, could have been, if you were on that cusp from, you thought maybe you were moving from C to B, but that didn't happen. It could have been due to the weighting of the categories. Another thing while we're on scoring that I want to touch on is the concept of essential criteria. So this has been around at the leadership or the A level for some time, but it was extended down to the awareness and management levels just last year. And so again, if for companies who may have been targeting a higher score, if you did not answer specific questions fully, you may have essentially been blocked from moving to that next grade. So those questions tend to focus in the governance and the risk management process areas. So modules 2 and modules 4. So making sure that you have strong answers for those questions will be really important this year as well. So Corinne, I think it's back to you to talk about how Green Places can help simplify some of this complexity.
Yeah, so I want to highlight that CDP reporting support is now a core part of what we do at Green Places. And so we're here to help try to clarify the reporting process overall, reduce the level of effort from your team. The idea is to use us to improve accuracy and improve scores. So we support data collection effort. We map all available data from the Green Places platform to Module 7. So if you're already working with us on a carbon footprint, it's sort of a streamlined process in order to be able to support that really detailed section. Um, and then live hands-on support to help craft responses and also use that in a sort of a gap analysis of where you're understanding that you can't respond to certain questions to identify improvements that are possible within your own sustainability strategy. We're definitely seeing a push from CDP from disclosure to demonstration of effort, as is always their standing mission. And so if you want to be scoring in those NIAAA categories, then we need to make sure that programs are also advancing as well as disclosure. And then, of course, direct submission support. And so on that note, I think it's important for us to highlight the disclosure cycle. So a couple of key quick deadlines for this year. Scoring criteria go live next week. Reporting officially opens June 16th, and then you have until September 15th to submit scored responses. We have seen in the past CDP extend those deadlines now and then. I'm sure they're expecting to avoid that this year because they did a bunch of that last year with the platform. They're trying to maintain a lot of consistency from year on year going forward. We'll share this timeline after the session, so don't feel like you need to catch everything now. The full methodology for this year's scoring will be published next week. And so obviously this webinar is happening in advance of that. We will release a blog with some details and share with the group here. I do also want to just point out the appeals window for last year is already closed, and it hasn't posted yet for next year. It's typically in March. And so that's sort of the next extended deadline you want to make sure you're aware of if you submit and are unsure of or dissatisfied with your score and you want to make a change, to be aware of that piece. And then lastly, stay tuned. Today's session is part of an ongoing mini-series covering all of the essential sustainability frameworks, burning questions from clients around where they need to disclose. So if you're already signed up, feel free to attend any and all upcoming sessions, or just watch the recordings, share afterward. Next up is EcoVadis on May 15th. But yeah, let's pause there. I'm sure there are questions. I see a couple coming in the chat. So feel free to drop them there and then we can answer one by one. I think the first one comes from Jenna. How come plastics and biodiversity themes are not scored? Riz, I don't know if you want to take that one or I could jump in.
Yeah, these are relatively new additions to kind of the environmental themes. Like I mentioned, CDP's been around for 25 years. Biodiversity and plastics, kind of recent additions to the questionnaire. My feeling on this is they don't want to score it just yet because there's an understanding that a lot of companies have nascent programs focused on these themes. And so it's hard to sort of parse out the kind of what makes a D versus a C versus a B versus A. So I think they're in the data collection stages now. It remains to be seen kind of when they'll begin scoring these, but continued alignment with like the TNFD framework, for example, will probably help push that along.
I think also the consolidation approach that they've taken to the environmental categories, so there are not many questionnaires, but one means that the expectation is that not every client or not every customer and not every company is going to have programs in those areas yet. And so negatively scoring those categories for those who are unable to disclose, I think would deter folks from disclosing in this way. So drive towards simplification. I expect that will stay consistent for some time. Christopher Reyes posted some takeaways. Review the new CDP scoring methodology when it's published next week. Attend the upcoming EcoVadis session. Submit CDP responses and be aware of the CDP appeals window. I really like that summary. Now we don't have to send you one.
No, copy and paste.
Yeah. And then a question, can we share more detail about the third-party verification requirements for 2025? Yes, absolutely, we can do that. Riz, you want to take that one?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, essentially, verification is it's a question. It's not essential criteria at the lower tiers. It is weighted highly at the higher tiers, and kind of is noted as a hallmark of like a mature program when it comes to kind of measuring and reporting your emissions. having a third party review that process and certify the accuracy is an important aspect. So it's not that it's mandatory as part of the CDP process. I want to be clear about that. You can submit your data without assurance. You will be asked, there is a specific question about it. Do you get assurance on your data? And you can say no. Don't leave it blank. Try not to leave any questions blank. But yeah, essentially, as you progress and you're looking for kind of reaching that B and A level, verification is very important.
Yeah, and I think we work a lot with clients on the full spectrum of their sustainability strategy, which means that we're jointly invested in you making good decisions about where to prioritize. And as your advisor, I would rather you submit to CDP and start disclosing and accept a slightly lower score than focus on assurance if you're not ready to do so or you don't have the resources to do so. Um, Most of the requirements around CDP are you disclosing to CDP? So if you have a supplier or investor requirement, yes, of course they want to see a stronger score, but right now I would encourage you to take advantage of using it as a guidance vehicle and a framework to understand your own sustainability performance. Um, Verification and insurance are becoming extremely and progressively important in regulations, and they will become a priority and a requirement writ large. There is also a correlation between scoring higher and having assurance. So if you've sort of hit your limit in certain areas and you're trying to understand why you're not scoring better in those categories, assurance is likely a component of that, as is demonstration of proof in the pudding of your programs. So I think focusing on those two pieces once you've established your programs will get you to that next level. The next question, what are your thoughts about doing life cycle analysis versus CDP and the investor appetite for these in the US today? And I'm happy to field that one first, and then Riz, feel free to jump in.
Go for it.
So the life cycle assessments, LCAs, are, for those of you who are not aware, a way of calculating the exact emissions of a product, or you can do this for a service. It's a much more detailed, sometimes also called a product carbon footprint. It's like a little bit of variation between those two things. We use those as inputs into your total carbon footprint if you have a product that requires an LCA. And what I like about an LCA is that it's specific to you as a company, and to you if you're producing a product, certainly, or service. So that we're no longer beholden to emissions factors and estimations of any kind. We can actually look at where the emissions are coming from in your supply chain. And that I think is extremely valuable and something that CDP wants to see. However, they're pretty different things. LCAs are a better understanding of what your direct emissions are. CDP is a way to take that understanding and disclose it externally. And so I think if your focus is on how do you operationalize reductions of emissions in your own company, and ideally if you're looking really in the weeds at what's the ROI of making these changes financially and from an emissions perspective, doing an LCA is going to help you understand that better. CDP is going to help you communicate those programs externally and show something akin to a verification process that will provide a kind of assurance to your investors, stakeholders, et cetera, that you are doing the work that you say that you're doing. We see a lot of headlines now around greenwashing and pressure to show that companies are actually doing what they say they're doing. That's really what CDP is for. If you were to do an LCA and disclose it publicly, I think you would get a massive amount of credit for doing so. But because it contains so much proprietary information, I think the outcome of the LCA, what is your product carbon footprint, and what are the detailed emissions in your products and services, where are they coming from, is really, really useful. And we would love to see more of that. But they're sort of two different avenues and two different types of disclosure. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Riz.
I think you said it really well. Specifically, an LCA would affect kind of the input of your reporting in that module 7 environmental performance under scope 3. And kind of there are some questions that ask about your level of confidence on your data with respect to scope 3, which often, if you're using high level spend-based emissions factors, level of confidence can be mediocre. But if you do an LCA and you spend that kind of time and effort, you should have higher confidence.
I don't see any other questions popping up in the chat for now, and I know that we're at time, and I am chronically guilty of running over. So I think I'll take advantage of the fact that chatter seems calm. If you do have any other questions for us, please reach out. We're available. Riz and myself will definitely be in touch, of course, with the blog next week, as we mentioned, to share our understanding of the full scoring methodology. And please join us for our next sessions. We'll follow up with you all by email, so you've got links to register. And if you're unable to attend, still register, and we'll make sure we send you the information after the fact. Thank you, everybody, so much. Thank you, Riz. Thank you, Kristen.
Have a great day.